Welcome to Cracked, the podcast, the program that slays the dragons of mental health by stripping away the shame, embarrassment, fear, and stigma. Because mental health isn't something that affects just some of us, it applies to all of us. Here to shine a new light on areas of mental health that often go unvisited are your hosts, Rebecca Shaper and Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello and welcome to Crack the Podcast, Slaying the Dragons of Mental Health with me, Sandy Sedgbeer. And we've lost Rebecca, it would seem, but I'm sure she'll be back with us in a minute. So let's just start. Now, according to mentalhealth.gov, the following are just 4 of the many common myths and misperceptions about mental health. People with mental health problems are violent and unpredictable. Children don't experience mental health problems. People with mental health problems are just weak. They can snap out of it if they try hard enough. And there's no hope for people with mental health problems once a friend or family member develops them. There is no going back. They will never recover. Well, with us today to share their experience, and I'm sorry, we just had a few technical problems. With us today to bust the myths and share their personal and professional experience of mental health issues and treatment are Bethany Yeiser and Mary-Beth-De-Bord. Bethany is the founder and president of the CURESZ Foundation and author of the book Mind Estranged, My Journey from Schizophrenia to Recovery. And Mary-Beth is a CURESZ board member, attorney and advocate who met Bethany while searching for answers for her son, who was ill with a brain disorder. Bethany Yeiser, Mary-Beth-De-Bord, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
And I'm Rebecca Shaper. All of a sudden, my connection just went off.
It's good to have you back. It threw me there for a while.
So my first question is for you, Bethany. Your memoir, Mind Estranged, chronicles your life as a promising university student through your gradual descent into schizophrenia, homelessness, and your unexpected full recovery. Could you give us a brief outline of your story, please?
Yes, absolutely. So I was an honor student in high school. I was practicing the violin for 4 hours a day, very serious, spent all my time dreaming about college. I won a half tuition scholarship to study biochemistry at the University of Southern California. And at first I was living my dream. I'm doing just remarkably well. I was taking difficult courses, concertmaster of the community orchestra, doing research. But with time, my personality began to change. My parents thought I was going through an adolescent kind of phase. There was so much more independence and so much change at the time. I started to lose interest in my classes, started to become obsessed with wanting to be like Mother Teresa, which is a very good thing, but I was taking it too far. In 2001, my junior year of college, my church decided to send a team of young women to China for 10 days. And I went there to one of the poorest regions of the whole country. And while I was there, I started to think, can I help 1 million people living in China? Which is a noble calling. And the answer to that would be, if you go to school for a long time, perhaps earn a PhD and study Chinese for years and do some traveling back and forth, then maybe you can make a difference. But that's not what I was thinking. I thought, I know I can help millions of people living in China. And I know that I can do that now. That was my first delusion. When I got back from China, I spent all my time planning a trip to Nairobi. I took the easiest classes I'd ever taken and scored some of my lowest grades. And I planned to live in a slum, in a Nairobi slum, rural area. And I went there and I saw these beautiful, strong young women with hopes and dreams just like me. They were aware they were poor. I was deeply affected. I got back to the University of Southern California after my Africa trip, and my mind was racing. It was like a cloud. and I could not move on. Then I started planning another international trip. I dropped out of the university. I was paranoid of my parents. I was afraid they'd stop me from becoming a prophet. And then in March of 2003, I actually moved out of my dormitory and became homeless. I was living in the university area, often sleeping in university libraries and lounges. This went on for 3 years, 3 years of hiding. And then my last year homeless, I actually slept outside. I was in a churchyard every night, which actually was across the street from a dorm where I had lived once as an honor student. You might say I'd fallen from the heights to the lowest point possible. My life was centered around my delusions. I often say when I was 16 years old, I was certain I was going to graduate from high school. I mean, I knew that if I had a disease like cancer or got into a car accident, I wouldn't, but I knew pretty sure that I was going to graduate from high school. In 2006, I was that sure about becoming a billionaire, a prophet, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, absolutely sure that these things were going to happen. And then after about 3 years homeless, one day in 2006, in January, I started hearing voices. I heard this chorus of voices inside of my mind talking to me, insulting me, telling me I was homeless, and then thrilling me by confirming my delusions. It was only the beginning. I was taking a shower at a friend's place a few days later when I heard these three guys outside the bathroom window making fun of me. And I got out of the shower to see these three guys, and there was no window. And it took a few minutes before I realized that those three guys actually were not there. I started having hallucinations at all time. The voices were getting louder and louder inside of my mind. I got to the point where I was just screaming back at the voices inside of my mind. And on March 3rd of 2007, which happened to be my 4th-year anniversary, if you will, of being homeless, I woke up screaming back at the voices in my mind. They were like a painful stimulus. I couldn't escape from them. It's like they could make me do anything. That morning I was taken to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. And when they picked me up, I thought to myself, I'm glad I'm going to the hospital because there's nothing wrong with me. And I know that they will let me out, immediately without delay. I had no idea that my life had fallen apart, that I was hearing voices at all times, having other hallucinations. While I was sleeping in the churchyard every night, I really expected that one night a helicopter would come and land nearby where I was sleeping and pick me up and take me to my next life as this billionaire, as the next Mother Teresa, as a prophet. And going to the hospital and being told that I had a mental illness it shouldn't have been embarrassing, but it was. It felt humiliating. And all my delusions, I started to realize that they were delusions and they were not going to happen. And it was really, really devastating.
Okay.
And my
Bethany,
parents.
oh, sorry. I was going to say, in your book, it's very touching, by the way. I mean, incredibly touching. You said that you never really regarded yourself as homeless because you weren't doing the things that you thought homeless people did. And yet there was another part of you that kind of had some kind of inkling. If you hadn't been taken to hospital, would you have ever gone on your own? Would you have sought help on your own?
I don't think so. It's interesting. I talk to alcoholics, people who have recovered from alcoholism or drug addiction, and they often talk about hitting rock bottom. For me, no matter how far I fell, I was not asking for help. And I do not think that I would ever have asked for help. My rock bottom, really, or one of the lowest points of my life, was being taken to that hospital.
Yeah.
That was the only thing that convinced me to speak with my mom and dad again. But it's amazing. I speak with so many people these days with schizophrenia and their families. And it's like no matter how far the person with schizophrenia living in homelessness falls, it seems there's never an epiphany where they realize that they need help and ask for help.
Were you ever I know your mother wrote a book as well,
Mhm. Yeah.
and she was a nurse. I don't know if she's still a nurse, and your father is a priest. Are they both still living?
Yes, my dad's a minister. My mom retired, believe it or not, 10 years ago from a nursing career that spanned about 25 years. And
Yeah.
my dad retired 1 year ago from 39 years in ministry. They are alive. Yeah.
And from what I remember from the book, your parents did not know where you were for 4 years. Am I correct?
Yes, my parents contacted my friends, they contacted my church, they contacted my professors. I would not have anything to do with it. And when I found out that a certain friend had connected with my parents, I would cut off that friend. And my parents eventually realized that if they kept contacting my friends, I wouldn't have any friends left. So, out of compassion for me, they actually stopped, proactively contacting everybody they could think of. But yeah, I was very afraid of them. I was very paranoid. And it was really interesting because when I started my first antipsychotic medication, the paranoia just melted away. And when I went off my first antipsychotic medication, the paranoia came back full swing.
Can we pause right there? I've got a question. I know sometimes it takes a while to get the right type of medication that works for you. Did
Yeah.
you have that process, or
Yes, I did.
okay?
So my journey to treatment started on March 3rd of 2007 when I was picked up and taken to that hospital. I thought that antipsychotics would be totally sedating, would turn me into a zombie. I didn't know that antipsychotics are medical drugs that recalibrate the neurotransmitters inside of your brain, leading to a reduction in symptoms and recovery. I didn't know that. I thought these drugs were just designed to wipe me out. So I was refusing meds. The doctor basically said, "You have to take meds or we'll give you a shot." So I started medication. After 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks in that hospital, the doctors determined that I was well enough to fly back to Ohio and recover at my parents' home. When I was at the hospital, I was sleeping a lot. I thought it was bored. I was just bored. When I got back to my parents' home, the side effects of my first medication showed up. Horrible side effects. It was like being on chemotherapy. Um, Muscle rigidity, extreme restlessness, uncontrollable eating and weight gain, sleeping 16 hours a night, sometimes more, anhedonia. I could look at my favorite picture and feel nothing as though I were blind. And over 12 months, I tried 5 different antipsychotics, up to 2 at a time. And they all helped some. Well, most of them helped some. Some of them didn't seem to help at all. Some had more side effects, some less. And after that 12 months, I really thought that my first doctor was correct. My first doctor said almost immediately, within 36 hours, that I was permanently and totally disabled, and this was the end of my life. And after these 12 months of 5 medications, I was starting to really think that he was probably right and that I would never get better. And that's when I had the wonderful opportunity to meet a doctor named Henry Nasrallah, who was radically different than any doctor I'd ever seen. Dr. Nasrallah didn't look at me and just see someone sedated, staring into space, exhausted, not herself. Dr. Nasrallah looked deeper, and he read about my scholarship to USC, about playing the violin. I had 3 publications when I was at USC. And he learned about all of that. And he made it his goal and his passion to see me get better, and not just better enough to live out in the community and just be managing outside the hospital.
Mhm.
He wanted me to return to school. He wanted to see me work again and have a productive life. Dr. Nasrallah prescribed a very underutilized medication for treatment resistant patients like me, which I'd never even heard of, called clozapine.
Yeah.
And I was told I needed a weekly blood draw. I could gain 50 to 100 pounds. We had to try it. I was desperate. And I was a clozapine responder. Within a month, I was seeing progress. Within 6 months, my voices were almost totally gone. It felt like a miracle. And Dr. Nasrallah and I established the CURESZ Foundation in 2016. And among our goals is talking to patients and their families about cutting edge and underutilized medications that they may have never heard of that may bring them even to their baseline or close to their baseline. But yeah, after I started clozapine, a year and a half went by. I enrolled at the University of Cincinnati to transfer my classes, hoping to graduate. And 2 years later, in 2011, I did graduate with my molecular biology degree with honors. And it was really exciting. And after that, Dr. Nasrallah recommended I write Mind Estranged, and it took 2 years, but it's been a really big part of my life.
Wow, it's an amazing story. Amazing story.
Mary-Beth, if we could come to you, you're a board member of CURESZ, the CURESZ Foundation. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you found Bethany.
My story is nothing other than amazing. How I found Bethany. I'm a mother of 4 sons, and my second oldest became ill probably in high school, although it was not really observable in any major degree until during his freshman year of college. He, in high school, was the All-American guy, top in his class, top in athletics, and his dream was to play Division I in his sport. And so my life with him during his growing years was trying to find that balance. He was a very intense guy, trying to find that balance that would lead him to his purpose in life. And his big dream at the time was to play at the Division I level. And he worked really hard at it, and he landed a full scholarship academically and a bit of money with the sport. The sport of his choice wasn't one that would give full rides for the sport itself. But he did the unthinkable. So we encouraged him, walked alongside him, and he wasn't thriving. He was needing increasing amounts of support from us. He was far away, so we didn't know if that was just part of it. And obviously, anytime you go away to college, there's a lot of change. And when you bite off playing a Division I sport, it's increasing amount of pressure. So we walked alongside him and then began observing behaviors that weren't the norm. And there were college transfers along the way and changes in academic choices in terms of what he was going to pursue. And finally, we understood that he was very ill, and he came home, and that began the process of us understanding the mental health landscape. We were people that had, now looking back, people with brain disorders, other mental health struggles in their lives, anxiety, depression, but didn't recognize it as such because we had never been educated in it. So what we were told at the time growing up was that this person didn't make it for this, that, or other reason. They just couldn't get it together, and variations on the theme. So when this happened to our son, we first went to his internist, who directed us to a psychiatrist, and it wasn't an easy process for us. As I imagine, it is rarely for any person in the United States of America an easy process. The system hasn't come along, the medical infrastructure system hasn't come alongside this aspect of our bodies and our health yet. My husband and I had some means, and I, being an attorney and an advocate, I'm a good detective, and I'm also very persistent and relentless. So I followed my son and became his support and caregiver. And through that process, when we kept hitting roadblocks and my son wasn't thriving as I thought he should be, I took a circle of my closest girlfriends and spoke with them and said, hey, look, I need help. For me, it was a big sea change. I had been the person that everyone came to for help. And now I was saying, I'm not going to be able to work. I may need meals. I don't know what I'm going to need from you ladies, but I need help. And one of the ladies is one of my dearest friends. And it turns out that she also had a family history of schizophrenia in her family, but had never spoken about it before. And she had been listening to a radio station channel, Sirius MD, and had heard Bethany and her mother promoting their book. And I was having lunch with her that day, and she shared this with me. So we had a brief lunch. I immediately ordered the books, read the books in lightning speed, and emailed Bethany. She emailed me right back. My son and Bethany and her mother and I met for lunch, a 3-hour lunch, and that began my son's true journey to recovery, because through that, I was asked to be a founding board member of CURESZ, and my son met Dr. Nasrallah, who in the space of 30 minutes accurately diagnosed him.
Wow.
So this was after a 5-year period of misdiagnoses at reputable hospitals with reputable doctors who had not enough time to truly sit with him, or had enough time, but had groupthinked him into a certain diagnosis. And so once Dr. Nasrallah accurately diagnosed him with the composite of illnesses that he had, it still took another year to get him the therapy that he needed, and then another search to find a doctor who could treat him appropriately within our means. So now he is doing much, much, much better.
Good.
I will say real quickly that for some people like Bethany, a drug can be the answer. A drug plus obviously changes in lifestyle and managing your stressors and having good support, which Bethany had all of that. For some people, they have a composite of illnesses, which the vernacular in the medical world is comorbidities. So they may suffer not only from, for example, schizophrenia, but they may have some autism issues. They may have obsessive compulsive disorder. They may have an anxiety disorder. No one person's brain is the same. So that was the case for my son. He actually was misdiagnosed with schizophrenia, which is the irony that I am now a board member for CURESZ. However, I firmly recognize that bringing the education of schizophrenia to the floor has opened education about many other brain disorders. And CURESZ is committed to shedding light on those as well, although our primary focus is schizophrenia and will remain that. However, my situation is such a miracle case. And because I feel so blessed that I was able to find the resources through Bethany's sharing her story and through these amazing doctors that serve with CURESZ, I am very committed to staying the course and doing whatever I can to bridge that gap so that people get the education and then can hopefully find their resources according to their own situation.
We're going to take a brief break now, but when we come back, I want to talk about those 4 myths that I mentioned at the beginning, because I know you can answer them. And I want to talk about the fact that the CURESZ Foundation has 28, at least, I think, individuals in recovery. So what you're doing is incredibly successful. And I think we need to know more about that. So we're going to take a brief break. You're listening to Crack the Podcast with me, Sandy Sedgbeer, and Rebecca Shaper. And we're talking to Bethany Yeiser and Mary-Beth-De-Bord from the organisation CURESZ, who, in addition to busting some of those most common myths and misperceptions about mental illness, are also sharing their own experiences. We'll be back after the break.
The Real Conscious Connection. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Worried about your friend but don't know how to reach out?
You could say how are you or get a fake tattoo. You could ask with an app if it works for you. You could chat with them in VR. It's all good if you think you should check in. Yeah, you should.
Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health.
Whatever gets you talking.
Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org.
Welcome back. Rebecca, I think you have some questions about the myths.
Why don't you go ahead, and I'm going to ask Bethany about CURESZ, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's address those 4 myths, which I think are very, very common, that all people with mental health issues, especially schizophrenia, are dangerous and violent.
Okay. Yes, I can answer that. Only a small percent of people with brain disorders are violent. It's the myth is perpetrated that people like me are dangerous. And if you look at people with brain disorders who are on medication or in treatment, their propensity to cause crimes or be violent is even lower. And it is more common for people with severe mental illness to be a victim as opposed to a victimizer. We are very vulnerable.
Yeah, I'm sure. Mary-Beth, what about the children do not experience mental health problems? Is that true?
No. In fact, a lot of mental health challenges emerge during childhood. And the difficulty is trying to parse out whether it is a mental health challenge or just all of the different stressors that we as human beings encounter as we grow. I would say I always was curious about some of my son's behaviors. He is an exceptional human being. It took him longer on some level to cognitively understand the lessons that we as parents were trying to educate him in. However, he always got it. So now, looking back, sure, do I wish I would have perhaps had him with some counseling or something. However, you can't look at it that now. You just have to talk to people using your experience and say, educate yourself now. Educate yourself about your family history. That is so important. Listen to the stories. Listen to the stories and then educate yourself about mental health, because some stories are entertaining stories, but some stories hold all of the information you need about a possible brain disorder. And don't just take one person's word for it at a certain moment in time, because brain disorders evolve and grow over time as a person grows. So the behaviors become more marked as a person ages. So if you see a child that's isolating a lot, and you're concerned about that, raise it with that child's primary care doctor, often throughout their growing years. Primary care doctors are increasingly being educated more and more in this field. So don't just think that it's okay because the child is doing better. It will recur. So if it does recur, then take action. But obviously, just shortly to answer your question, that's a falsehood that I believe we as people perhaps want to believe, because it's very painful to acknowledge that your child may be struggling with any kind of illness, but especially something involving the brain, because it's the cancer of our age. It's been so stigmatized. And the immediate reaction of many people, still, I have acquaintances, I would not say they're any longer friends, but I have acquaintances who do not fully understand and will say things like, oh, that person is being enabled, or that person is just really bright, or, they will try to label an issue instead of going deep, putting aside their fears and misperceptions, and actually learning that the brain is an organ, just like the heart, just like the liver, and it can become diseased.
Yes. And it's really sad because I know teenagers, from my brother, y'all know the story of my brother, and his started actually in high school, isolating, as you mentioned, Mary Beth, isolating with friends and just not communicating with anyone. And he just became very despondent, and his behavior started changing as well. And I think some parents think that may be like a teenage attitude, but you're correct. They have to really look deep into the situation and embrace it, and not be fearful of it or embarrassed because their child has, quote, a mental health. It's almost like a projection in a way. I think it's projecting their feelings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I just really commend what y'all are doing. It's just incredible. And that leads me, Bethany, to ask you the question about the CURESZ Foundation. Can you go more into that
Yes.
for
So
the
again,
audience?
we're all about education and advocacy. Education about cutting edge and underutilized medications, including clozapine. We have a treatment checklist. These are 9 things that I wish so much I had known on day one, that I'd like everyone to know on day one when they're diagnosed, including learning about schizophrenia. It's so important to understand it as a brain disorder. Making goals, vitamins and supplements, diet and exercise, clozapine, long-acting injectables, which are very effective at preventing relapse, tardive dyskinesia, and some other topics as well. But for example, I wish I had been told on day one when I was diagnosed that I had a treatable brain disorder. The medications are medical, they're designed to heal my brain. Wish I had been told that. And among other things, I wish I'd been told that if my medications didn't work, that clozapine was an option.
My brother was they used a lot of different medications, and one of them was Haldol. And then,
Yeah.
and that
old.
really, did they use that on you? Because that made him extremely flat. I felt like I was talking to the medication and not him. So,
Haldol is an older medication.
mhm,
Haldol is what they call a very strong dopamine blocker. The newer antipsychotics are not as strong at blocking dopamine, but that's the reason that it made your brother so flat. I was never on haloperidol, but I was on medications that came out in the late 80s, and they were also pretty heavy D2 dopamine blockers. Um, yeah, so I no, I was never on that, and clozapine happens to be the weakest dopamine blocker of all the standard antipsychotics,
mhm,
and
mhm.
nobody knows why it works so remarkably well. But anyway, I'd also like to say I've been told many times, oh, you're the exception to the rule, or, well, since you recovered, you probably never really had schizophrenia,
Wow.
even though my illness was textbook. So I started featuring people I call survivors who are thriving despite schizophrenia. I believe we have 31 people featured now on our website. So that's really important to us. We have a YouTube channel with about 56 videos. The vast majority of them are topics in schizophrenia. What else do we do? We publish a quarterly newsletter, which is very research related on a variety of topics. And we've started cures clubs. We've started a few small clubs, mostly in the Midwest. We have one girl from London, England, who found cures and was passionate about it, setting up her own clubs. So we have her overseas, but most of our clubs are in Ohio. But that's one of our big pushes right now, to have these student gatherings where we can educate kids, young adults, about the warning signs of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, what to do if you have anxiety, depression, how to recognize it in others, know that it's a brain disorder, know that, yes, this is treatable. There should be no shame in accepting help. So that's one of our biggest pushes right now.
And each individual is different, as you said at the beginning.
Mhm.
I mean, each treatment is different. It's not, as you said, so cookie cutter. And
No.
the doctor that both of you had treating your son, Mary Beth, and you, Bethany, what a gift.
Mhm.
I, I wish we had more medical doctors like that, because I think I can just speak from my personal experience with my brother that I felt like some of the doctors really weren't listening to him.
Yeah,
And
it's too
for
bad.
that, and for your doctor to Nasrallah, is that correct? Is that how Dr.
Nasrallah, yeah.
Nasrallah, for him to sit down and really go through your profile, who you were as a person before all
Mhm.
this happened, is incredible. He was bringing you back to life, I feel like.
He was, yeah, he
Yes.
was.
And with your son, he treated your son as well from our conversation in the past, didn't he, Mary Beth? I thought.
He did not treat him as his patient. He met with him for 30 minutes, accurately diagnosed the primary illnesses that he had, and then helped us to work with the then current doctor to get him some treatment that he needed that was outside of the pharmaceutical area. And then through CURESZ, I met Paul's current doctor, who is actually on the board, and he has been treating my son.
Is now, just for the listeners, Mary Beth, your son, is he on one medication? Is he on a couple of medication?
He's on a couple, more than a couple, uh,
Yeah.
and he's on some non-pharmaceutical support by way of supplements,
Mm-hmm.
which has been very important for
Yeah.
him and helped him. What happens to a person when they have a primary diagnosis of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or um, probably autism, although I can't speak to that, is their system, their bodily system also is compromised. So
Mm-hmm.
they have what we would call adrenal fatigue. because they've got so much stress. The stresses of modern day living take such a toll on their bodies that the body is a miracle and it will adapt for a person to survive. But because their brain health is poor, the rest of the body that's trying to support them also is taxed. So some people need supplementation adrenally. Some people need to change their diet.
Yes, I've heard of that too.
Many of ways. It could be less sugar. It oftentimes means less sugar, but all of us need to focus on that. But it could mean, more vegetables, or certain types of vitamins that they need more of. So what I think is sorely missing is a holistic approach to the treatment of any illness, but especially illnesses affecting the brain. Because we start to treat the whole body, we can see a lot more improvement in people's functionality. And that's what my son has experienced.
Absolutely. I agree.
Question I have is we're learning an awful lot about the microbiome and the connection between the gut and the brain. And certainly with a lot of children who are autistic, they have found that changing their diet can be exceedingly helpful. And it seems to me that there are more connections here than we've yet delved into. Do you have any research or any information about that? Is it something that you're really looking deeply into?
I can't speak to that. Bethany has more of a medical background. She may be able to speak to that in terms of the schizophrenia per se. What I can say is that personally, for my experience with my children, what they eat and when they eat has made a huge difference in terms of their ability to sleep better. And as we all know, getting a good night's rest can affect your mood greatly. And especially if you have a mood disorder, that all plays into your ability to be healthier. It has not yet been the issue that's been targeted for the reason for the illness. I think it's one of the issues that affects people when they have brain disorders.
Some people benefit from a gluten-free diet, a dairy-free diet. A lot of it is trial and error. And I do believe I benefited from taking various supplements that I talked to my doctor about. Everyone's different, but I think pretty standard are B vitamins, fish oil, sometimes N-acetylcysteine, even though I tried N-acetylcysteine and didn't do well, which was unusual. But the important thing really is to understand that these diets and supplements should really be in addition to treatment, which often includes antipsychotics, because I've seen many times people are convinced to go on heavy supplements, a new diet, be very careful what they eat. They go off their antipsychotics, they relapse oftentimes. And then when they start their antipsychotic again, it may not be as effective even at higher doses. So again, I think it's really great to explore the diet and supplements, but not in place of standard treatment.
Not instead of.
Do you feel like medical doctors are the only source of recovery? Do you feel like there are other sources, say like shamanism? I know that there are people out there that are extremely gifted, and I know this is kind of a side question, but I'm just curious on y'all's, have you ever run across anyone who has had that type of treatment through shamanism that has been able to treat these people with mental health issues?
I personally have not. It is not the path that we advocate for in the Western world and our demographic. I would never put anything in outside of someone's path that I'm not familiar with or not, but that is not our mission statement or our vision.
Right.
So who knows? I mean, I don't know people who have used a shaman. I'm not familiar with their path or journey or what their symptoms were, or what they were struggling with. So I just can't speak to it.
I was just curious because I know in this field that that seems to be some of the topic that I hear. And I was just curious, but yeah, I definitely know that you don't advocate that because what you're doing works.
Yeah.
It works. I will say that there is obviously a spiritual side to any illness.
Right.
I would,
Yeah.
it's profound, right?
Yeah.
How that plays out in each person's situation is unique.
Yeah.
In our own situation, my son has benefited greatly from spiritual support, and that has helped in his recovery. He would not be able to have. He would not have recovered had he not gotten the right medication. However,
Right.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who say they prayed for me over the years, and I think that has made a big difference. So if people find encouragement and hope and healing through prayer, I think that's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
And I also really like what Mary Beth said. I really do believe there's a spiritual component to all illnesses, not just to brain disorders. I mean, cancer, for example, I think there's evil in that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a lovely thing for people to find comfort through God.
Bethany, your mum's book, which is a companion book to yours, I mean, and it's a great idea, to have the daughter's story of what she was going through and then what it was like for the parents as well. When you read your mum's book, how did you feel? Because she was seeing things that you couldn't see at that time.
Yeah, I just felt really bad because when I was homeless, I was thinking about my delusions all the time, and I was going through kind of a mania, and a lot of it was really thrilling. I wouldn't want to live it again, but a lot of it was thrilling. And my parents did not have that thrill. My parents were living in hell. They tried everything. They didn't know if I was dead or alive at the end, and they just suffered terribly and much more than I suffered. So yeah, I felt pretty bad that she'd gone through all of that. I also thought it was interesting, all the things that, I remember that she did for me outside the hospital. For example, when I was hospitalized in Los Angeles for the first time, I was really smart at giving a false address so that I didn't look homeless, at least to some extent. And they were able to prove that that was a false address. And, getting me a new prescription right away when I got back to Ohio, which was hard to do. And, yeah, there was a lot of work that they did that I'd forgotten about. So, and, they never gave up on me.
Yeah.
And my mom talks about how hard I was, to diagnose. Because when she was going to nursing school in the 70s, she saw a psych ward. The people there were so desperately sick. And, my first symptoms were being a little bit isolated, being too busy, not taking out time for friends. I mean, we never, expected this to spiral into schizophrenia. So yeah, talking about how hard it can be to diagnose, especially in the early stages.
and because the patient lacks insight and awareness, so you
Yeah.
could ask the patient a question and they could give you a perfectly reasonable answer. And so it is really difficult.
And I can't imagine the voices. I know my brother heard voices as well, and his voices were not good voices. So it sounds like your voices were detrimental to you just from hearing. Am I correct?
Mine?
Yeah.
Mine went back and forth. They were totally derogatory, unbelievably annoying, like being stung by a bee. It was that bad or worse. But then sometimes they would confirm my delusions. They'd say, you are going to marry a billionaire or win a Nobel Peace Prize. So sometimes they were thrilling, but overall they were horrible. I think of it as similar to having chronic pain. it was that kind of a condition. It wasn't just like I heard a voice off in the distance that I could choose to follow or ignore. It was horrible. So.
Could I say something real quickly, Rebecca?
Yes. Yes.
For the parents out there. And Bethany shed a little bit of light on this earlier when she was giving her story. The first doctors my son saw said exactly the same type of thing like Bethany's doctor said. You can't. You won't be able to do this. You can't do this. And inside of me, when I was hearing this with my son, I said, no, I don't believe that, because I know my son. I know in my heart that there is a way through this, and that what you're telling him isn't right. My son couldn't hear that. He was so demoralized, and he took it to heart for so long, which impaired his recovery. So if you as a parent hear that from a provider, try and find another provider.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my situation, I was as well versed as I was in so many other areas of life. I was desperately ignorant about this area of medicine, and it's not your fault, because there isn't a lot of support there anyway. So try the best you can to get good support with a doctor that's going to say, if you follow these protocols, here is the range of recovery that I feel is available to you, that gives you hope.
Yeah. And there's possibility they can go beyond that, just like Bethany, you're an example of that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine a doctor saying that. I can't imagine with you, Mary Beth, as a parent and sitting there listening to what that doctor, I think I would be, they'd have to chain me to the chair because I would just be infuriated. That's adding to the negative voices.
Absolutely. And it's planting suggestions. You know, if that isn't a hypnotic suggestion, what is?
Yeah.
Yeah. We've only got a couple of minutes left. So if there's anything else that you want people to know, tell us now.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to say that my schizophrenia was not a life sentence. You know, with treatment and medication, I brought to full recovery, which is very close to my baseline. I often feel like a diabetic taking insulin, a type 1 diabetic. They need insulin every day. They will for life. But when they're on insulin, they can live a pretty normal, happy life. And thanks to effective antipsychotic that works best for me, since I take it every day and am committed to my recovery, I can find, a meaningful life. And through the CURESZ Foundation, we hope to help more patients work effectively with their doctors, encourage more doctors to be proactive and not give up, to use clozapine more since it is so underutilized. And we just hope to help patients and their families on this journey through education and advocacy.
Do you want to give the website again?
Yeah, sure. So we are the CURESZ Foundation, which is CURESZ, as in cure schizophrenia, CURESZ.org.
And Mary Beth, do you have anything else you would like to say?
I would encourage parents who have a struggling child to seek treatment early, get a caring psychiatrist that will listen to you and your child, and don't give up, because the brain is a miracle organ and it continues to grow and heal. So with appropriate treatment, the limits are really boundless.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Rebecca, anything you want to add before we close?
Just thank you very much for coming on and telling your story and just being an advocate for mental health and schizophrenia. And I just really applaud what y'all are doing. How y'all been in it, for 4 or 5 years? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Almost 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you.
Is it still the case that you have people can go onto your website and they can look up clinicians in their area and find people who close to where they live who may be able to help them?
CURESZ has 2 what we call expert panels. We have a clozapine expert panel with about 120 doctors. Few are international. The vast majority are in the United States. When people write me asking for a doctor, I usually refer them to the clozapine expert panel because, of course, these doctors who prescribe clozapine are generally just great physicians overall and can, of course, prescribe other medications. We also
Bethany,
have
I'm going to have to close it there, I'm afraid. Quickly say what the other one is.
Yeah.
tardive
Very quickly.
dyskinesia expert panel for TD medications.
Okay. All right. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today.
A wealth of information. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bethany Yeiser's book, Mind Estranged, is available from online bookstores, as is the companion book written by Bethany's mother, Karen Yeiser, which is called Flight from Reason, a mother's story of schizophrenia, recovery and hope. And once again, for more information about the CURESZ Foundation, visit CURESZ.org.
And
That's it from us this week.
All caps.
That's all caps. I don't think it really matters actually when you're doing, does it? No. Okay, we'll be back at the same time 2 weeks from now. Till then, it's goodbye from me, Sandy Sedgbeer.
And me, Rebecca Shaper. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.